you're late again?" Sarah couldn't help but complain as Daniel walked in the door at 11:30 at night. He leaned down to kiss her gently on the forehead, then presented her with 2 gift boxes. "Work's been crazy busy lately. Here, presents for you and Lily." Sarah, a driven entrepreneur, ran her own company. Daniel, in contrast, worked as a driver for someone else. His schedule was even more demanding than hers, and she often wondered exactly what kept him so occupied. However, the dynamic of a successful wife and a less conventionally successful husband was already a delicate balance. She hesitated to pry too much, not wanting him to feel belittled or inadequate. "Thank you, honey." Sarah accepted the gifts, pressing a kiss to his cheek. As she did, her eyes caught a strand of long, flaxen blonde hair clinging to the collar of Daniel's shirt. Sarah had long, black hair. This hair was definitely not hers. And to be caught so intimately on his collar, just how close had this woman been? A frown creased her brow, a seed of unease planting itself in her mind. Daniel, looking parched, slumped onto the sofa and reached for a glass of water. Sarah was never one for games or subtle hints. She preferred directness. "Daniel," she began, her voice steady but laced with suspicion, "are you being extra nice to me lately because you've done something you shouldn't have?" It was a common trope, wasn't it? Men often showered their wives with gifts as a way to assuage their guilt after wrongdoing. And Daniel wasn't usually this generous with presents. Daniel looked genuinely surprised. "Of course not. Why would you even think that?" Before Sarah could answer, a knock echoed through the apartment. She opened the door to find her mother-in-law standing on the threshold. Evelyn, though in her late 50s, maintained a youthful figure and favored heavy makeup. She dressed in a way that often seemed more befitting a woman in her 40s, and tonight, her flaxen blonde hair was styled in loose waves, an almost exact match to the strands Sarah had just noticed on Daniel's shirt. Seeing Evelyn's hair, Sarah's suspicion momentarily dissipated. She chided herself for being overly suspicious, for letting her mind wander down paths of unfounded jealousy. Evelyn breezed past Sarah and addressed Daniel directly. "I told you to stay over tonight, but no, you insisted on coming back. Then you left your phone charger at my place. Had to bring it back to you." It was late, but Evelyn showed no sign of leaving. She often stayed over, much to Sarah's quiet annoyance. Evelyn disliked sleeping alone and, whenever she visited, she expected Daniel to remain in the master bedroom, while Sarah was relegated to sharing a bed with her mother-in-law. It wasn't fear of being alone that drove Evelyn's need for company. Sarah suspected it was something closer to jealousy, a bizarre form of competition for Daniel's attention. Evelyn had a habit of posing hypothetical scenarios. If Sarah and Evelyn were in danger, whom would Daniel choose to save? It was hardly the behavior of a typical mother, it felt more like a rival vying for affection. The next morning, Evelyn was already bustling around, urging Sarah to get up and make breakfast. Cooking was not Sarah's forte. Instead, she planned to buy breakfast downstairs. On her way out, she bumped into Sophia, her close friend and Lily's kindergarten teacher, and invited her to join for breakfast. "Sophia's here?" "Perfect timing, I can drive you and Lily to school," Daniel offered cheerfully. Sophia was Lily's kindergarten teacher. Evelyn, buttering a bread roll, rolled her eyes. "Really, Daniel? Perhaps not. A single woman pushing 30, still unmarried. You two walking around together will just invite gossip." Sophia visibly wilted, her cheeks flushing crimson. Sarah bristled. "What's wrong with being unmarried at 30? Is she eating your rice? Taking the clothes off your back? You're the one who dresses like a teenager, hardly respectable yourself, but you don't see us commenting." Sophia and Daniel tried to mediate, but the breakfast table devolved into a battleground. No one finished their meal. Lily, thankfully, chose that moment to wake up. Sarah, seizing the opportunity to escape the tense atmosphere, gathered Lily and left with Sophia. They ended up at a nearby cafe, grabbing a quick breakfast, before Sarah drove them both to kindergarten. With a relatively free day at work, Sarah planned to head straight home after dropping off Lily. At the school gate, she ran into another parent from Lily's class and fell into casual conversation. The other parent leaned in conspiratorially, lowering their voice. "Don't let Sophia's shy demeanor fool you. She's quite the wild one, I hear. Rumor has it she's entangled with one of the parents, and his wife is completely clueless." Sarah's hackles rose. "Were you hiding under their bed to see that? If you don't know for sure, maybe keep your gossip to yourself." The other parent fell silent, and Sarah, feeling a surge of protectiveness towards Sophia, got back in her car and drove home. As she walked through the door, she found Evelyn perched on Daniel's lap, sobbing dramatically as if the world had just ended. "Oh, to be called unrespectable at my age. I might as well just give up and die," Evelyn wailed, spotting Sarah. The theatrics were about to begin again. Sarah raised an eyebrow, her tone laced with sarcasm. "Still feeling wronged?" A mother in her 50s, cuddling in her son's lap and throwing tantrums. "I should take a picture and show it around your village. Let's see if the city folk are just overreacting, or if even your village hasn't seen anything quite like this." She turned to Daniel, a sudden, sharp idea forming. "Actually, Daniel, it's almost Qingming Festival. Let's go back to your hometown for the tomb sweeping." It was a spur-of-the-moment suggestion, intended to unsettle Evelyn more than anything. To her surprise, Evelyn's weeping ceased abruptly. She scrambled to her feet, stammering, Why you don't even have a son to honor." "What tomb sweeping? Are you trying to make Daniel lose face?" Sarah and Daniel had been married for 5 years, yet Sarah had never been to his hometown. In fact, beyond Evelyn, she hadn't met any of Daniel's other relatives. They seemed oddly resistant to discussing their family or their hometown with her. She usually avoided the topic, but Evelyn's behavior had finally pushed her to the edge. Evelyn, seemingly panicked by the prospect of Sarah actually visiting their hometown, stopped her dramatics and stalked out of the room, a sullen expression plastered on her face. Daniel followed her out to see her home, returning shortly afterward to placate Sarah. "You handled her perfectly." "My mother, well, her mouth often runs faster than her brain." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You're not mad at me?" "Mad at you? Why would I be? People like her prey on the weak. You stood up for yourself, and about time too." Daniel playfully tweaked her cheek. Sarah's earlier annoyance began to dissipate. Evelyn's personality was certainly challenging. If Daniel hadn't consistently sided with Sarah, their marriage might have crumbled long ago. Daniel's phone buzzed. It was his boss, calling him in. He quickly left, heading out in his car. Around noon, Sophia messaged Sarah. "Hey, we need family photos for class in the afternoon. Find a nice one. I'm going to use yours as an example to show the little ones how beautiful my best friend is." Sarah chuckled and agreed, selecting a recent family photo and sending it to Sophia, thinking nothing more of it. However, that afternoon, Sophia called Sarah, her voice tight with concern. "Sarah, do you know Ethan's mother?" "Ethan? No, who's Ethan?" "Ethan Fong, from Lily's class." "Do you know his mom?" Sophia clarified. "Does Daniel know her?" Sarah sensed something amiss. "Sophia, just tell me what's going on." Sophia hesitated for a moment before saying, "Remember the family photos? Ethan brought one in today, and Sarah, it looks like Lily and Ethan have the same dad. And I've heard Ethan's mother is, well, involved with a married man." The phone went silent, but Sarah's mind was buzzing, a chaotic hum of disbelief and dread. Was this some bizarre coincidence? Or was Daniel truly having an affair, and with another woman on top of everything else? Sophia, clearly worried, swapped her afternoon class with another teacher and rushed over to Sarah's apartment. "Daniel picked up Lily a few times, and I saw him talking to Ethan's mom. They seemed familiar." And Ethan seemed very comfortable with him. Has Daniel been acting strangely lately? Sophia pressed, her concern etched on her face. Sarah's mind raced, piecing together fragments of recent events. She swallowed hard, admitting, He's been smelling faintly of women's perfume lately. And yesterday, there was a woman's long hair on his shirt. And he's been coming home incredibly late every night. Silence descended between them, heavy and unspoken. The pieces were falling into place, painting a grim picture. Daniel, it seemed, was likely having an affair. After a long pause, Sophia said, when I came over, I managed to get a strand of Ethan's hair. Just in case. You should get a paternity test done. As Sophia handed over the small, carefully sealed bag containing the strand of hair, Daniel's name flashed across Sarah's phone screen. Boss is having another late night gathering at that place again. I'll be home late, you go to sleep early, he said, his voice casual, almost too casual. The moment he hung up, Sophia exploded, her voice laced with anger. Late night gathering, my foot. Ethan told his nanny that Daniel is going to visit him and his mom tonight. Sarah's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. Fury ignited within her. That's it, she declared, her voice trembling with rage. We're going to Ethan's house. Now. And with that, Sarah and Sophia stormed out, determined to confront the truth. On the drive to Brenda's apartment, Sophia unleashed a torrent of anger, cursing Daniel and Brenda with a ferocity that almost eclipsed Sarah's own simmering rage. Sophia seemed even more outraged than Sarah herself. They arrived at Brenda's apartment building. The door to her apartment was slightly ajar. As Sarah and Sophia pushed it open and stepped inside, a wave of sound washed over them, the unmistakable, sickening sounds of lovemaking. Sarah's legs went weak, a tremor running through her body. She felt a mix of nausea and white-hot rage. Daniel, you! Sarah roared, kicking the door wide open. But the scene that greeted her eyes froze the words in her throat. Instead of Daniel, two complete strangers were locked in a passionate embrace on the sofa. Confusion washed over Sarah, momentarily eclipsing her anger. 30 minutes later, Daniel arrived, hand in hand with a bewildered Ethan. Sarah, along with Daniel, found herself apologizing profusely to Brenda and the man from the apartment. The man, his face a mask of irritation, was Brenda's sugar daddy, Daniel's boss. Daniel, this better not happen again, he snapped. As for you, Ms. Busybody Teacher, he glared at Sophia, leaking a student's address? Prepare for a formal complaint. He was furious, but Daniel knew too many of his secrets, so firing him was not an option. He had asked Daniel to bring the family photo for Ethan because he didn't want to be in it himself, fearing exposure. Hence, the whole disastrous mix-up. Sarah felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She glanced at Ethan, and for the first time, really looked at him. She had to admit, there was a striking resemblance between Ethan and Daniel. Her observation was cut short by Brenda's sharp, venomous voice. What are you staring at? My son is way out of your league, you hear? Out of my league? Sarah thought, a surge of indignation rising within her. I'm a business owner, for goodness sake. Far more respectable than someone who opens their legs. For a paycheck. But she had barged in on the wrong apartment, fueled by a misunderstanding. She bit back her retort, unwilling to escalate the already awkward situation. They left Brenda's apartment quickly, Sarah's mind still reeling. She tried to dismiss the Ethan incident as a bizarre coincidence, pushing it to the back of her mind. Once they were outside Brenda's building, Daniel rounded on Sophia, his anger finally erupting. You're single, you're jealous of my happy marriage, aren't you? Trying to tear us apart. You're despicable, you know that? Sophia shrank back, avoiding his gaze, her lower lip trembling. Sarah, knowing Sophia's intentions were purely to protect her, stepped forward, her voice firm. This was my fault, Daniel, not Sophia's. If you're angry, be angry at me. I deserve it for misjudging you. But you will not speak to Sophia like that. Daniel huffed, but didn't retort further. He had narrowly avoided being fired. Even for his usually placid temperament, he was clearly still simmering with anger. He announced he was going out for a drink. Sarah didn't argue. He drove off in his boss's car. Sarah drove Sophia home. "I'm so sorry, Sophia," Sarah said, her voice laced with guilt. "If you lose your job because of this, I'll help you find something new, with even better pay, I promise." "It's okay, Sarah. Honestly, I didn't mean to cause trouble," Sophia murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah shook her head. "You just made a mistake, that's all. No harm done." Sophia hesitated, then said, "But Sarah, I don't think it was a mistake." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos. She stopped on one taken near a shopping mall. It showed Daniel carrying Brenda in his arms, bridal style, and placing her gently into a car. "Brenda is Daniel's boss's mistress, yes. But that doesn't mean Daniel is innocent," Sophia said, her voice quiet but firm. Sarah stared at the photo, her blood running cold. That image, it was far too intimate for a simple act of chivalry. That night, sleep evaded Sarah. The photo replayed behind her eyelids, a loop of unsettling intimacy. Daniel returned in the dead of night. Sarah, simmering with resentment, feigned sleep until he was fully settled in bed before kicking him hard, sending him tumbling onto the floor. "What was that for, Sarah?" Daniel groaned, rubbing his backside. Whether genuinely confused or feigning innocence, he never raised his voice or showed anger towards her. Sarah snapped on the bedside lamp, the sudden brightness illuminating the tension in the room. "East Joy Mall," she stated, her voice sharp. "Sophia took a picture of you carrying Brenda into a car. What exactly is going on between you and your boss's mistress?" Daniel scrambled to his feet, his expression shifting to one of wounded innocence. "She'd twisted her ankle that day, Sarah. There's nothing between us, I swear." "Really?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "She's my cousin, Sarah, my blood cousin. And it's the Qingming holiday weekend tomorrow, right? Let's go back to my hometown for the tomb sweeping. You can ask anyone there, all the villagers, see if I'm lying." Daniel insisted, his voice earnest. Sarah, still deeply suspicious, found herself reluctantly agreeing. Maybe a trip to his hometown would finally reveal the truth. It was certainly better than living in this suffocating cloud of doubt and suspicion. The next day, Sarah, Lily in tow, accompanied Daniel on the journey to his hometown. Sarah didn't have a picture of Brenda, but Daniel did. He showed it to an elderly woman sitting outside her house. "Granny, do you recognize this woman?" "Why, that's your cousin who married that rich fellow, isn't it?" the old woman replied instantly. They asked several more villagers, receiving the same confirmation each time. Sarah began to feel a sliver of relief, a sense of shame washing over her for her unfounded suspicions. Perhaps she had been too quick to judge. Daniel, sensing her shift in mood, took her hand as they walked to the family cemetery. "Lucky for me she is my cousin," he chuckled, "otherwise, things would be really awkward right now, wouldn't they?" "I'm sorry, Daniel," Sarah said sincerely. "I really misjudged you." It was true. If the roles were reversed, and Daniel had wrongly accused her twice, she would have been furious. Daniel squeezed her hand. "Between you and me," he lowered his voice conspiratorially, "Sophia. Well, she's a bit too clever for her own good. And you, my dear, you're a little too trusting, like a lamb in wolf's clothing sometimes. You're better off keeping your distance from her. She's not to be trusted, I tell you." Sophia had been Sarah's best friend for nearly 20 years, since elementary school. Even if she and Daniel divorced, Sarah knew she would never sever ties with Sophia. She dismissed Daniel's words as mere jealousy, letting them drift past her ears like a summer breeze. After paying their respects at the family graves, they prepared to leave the cemetery when they encountered Evelyn hurrying towards them, a flustered expression on her face. "You came to the hometown without even telling me? Don't you think I matter at all?" Evelyn complained, her voice laced with a practiced whine. Then, her tone shifted to anxious urgency. Did you talk to anyone in the village? Did they say anything strange?" She seemed genuinely terrified that Sarah might have stumbled upon some hidden secret. Before Sarah could respond, Daniel interjected smoothly, a reassuring smile on his face. "We greeted a few neighbors, chatted for a bit, that's all. With me around, what could they possibly say that they shouldn't? It's almost as if you two have something to hide, something you desperately don't want me to know," Sarah said casually, a flicker of suspicion reigniting in her mind. Daniel and Evelyn exchanged a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, a moment of shared tension that Sarah didn't miss. But they remained silent, offering no explanation. As they reached the entrance to their ancestral home, a young woman approached Daniel, a warm smile lighting up her face. "Daniel. Long time no see." Daniel acknowledged with a curt nod. The woman's gaze shifted to Sarah, then to Evelyn standing slightly behind them, her arm linked with Sarah's. She chuckled, a hint of amusement in her voice. "This must be your wife? And, is this your sister?" In rural villages, it wasn't uncommon to see siblings with a significant age gap. And Evelyn, with her youthful appearance, could easily be mistaken for a younger sister. But this was Daniel's neighbor. She knew him. Why wouldn't she recognize his own mother? Before Sarah could correct her, Evelyn interjected, her voice deliberately vague, "Not exactly." She offered no further clarification, simply pulling Sarah away, steering her towards the house. Once inside, Sarah turned to Daniel, a question forming on her lips. "Your neighbor didn't recognize your mother?" "That was my high school classmate, from another village. She's never met my mother before. She only married my neighbor a few months ago," Daniel explained, his tone perfectly reasonable. Sarah was still puzzled, but it was just a passing curiosity. However, her casual question seemed to trigger an explosive reaction from Evelyn. Evelyn rounded on Sarah, her voice rising to a furious pitch. "Why are you asking so many questions? Sarah, have you been looking down on me ever since you married Daniel? Do you think I'm some kind of old, shameless woman, with a dirty mind full of filth? What are you even talking about? I didn't say anything wrong. Why are you yelling at me?" Sarah retorted, taken aback by the sudden, unprovoked outburst. And what was this nonsense about her thinking Evelyn was dirty? Where had that come from? Sarah braced herself for the usual tears and histrionics. But then Daniel murmured, "Walls are thin here, Mom. Neighbors can hear everything," and Evelyn abruptly fell silent. The outburst ceased as quickly as it had begun. It was Sarah's first time in Daniel's hometown. Coming from the south, she found the northern village and its customs quite intriguing. She had initially hoped to spend a few more days exploring and getting to know the locals. However, for the next 2 days, Daniel kept her occupied with sightseeing trips, cleverly preventing her from having any meaningful conversations with the villagers. As soon as the holiday ended, Daniel packed them all up to return home. And even on their departure, he seemed subtly watchful, as if still afraid she might strike up a conversation with someone, unearthing some carefully guarded secret. Daniel and Evelyn's behavior was becoming increasingly strange, bordering on paranoid. It was hard not to notice. But everyone had their secrets, didn't they? If they wanted to keep something from her, fine. It wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't as if Evelyn was an imposter, or that they were hiding some unspeakable, incestuous relationship, was it? They arrived back in the city via high-speed train, reaching home around 8 in the evening. Barely had Daniel stepped inside when his phone rang. It was his boss. He turned to Sarah, a familiar explanation on his lips. "Boss is back at my cousin's place. Needs me to pick him up. I'll be right back." Sarah still held Brenda in low regard, seeing her as nothing more than a mistress. But as long as Daniel maintained a professional distance, it wasn't her concern. Daniel didn't return that night. The next morning, just as Sarah dropped Lily off at kindergarten, a courier arrived with a package, a local express delivery from a paternity testing center. The conclusion of the report stared back at her, stark and undeniable. Based on the analysis of 15 different genetic loci, the probability of this biological parent-child relationship is 99.9999%. Ethan Fong and Daniel were, in fact, father and son. But Daniel had sworn Brenda was his cousin. What in the world? After the initial shock, a wave of disgust and revulsion washed over Sarah. She wanted to hurl the report in Daniel's face, to scream and rage. But then, her phone rang again. It was Lily, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mommy, Aunt Sophia is being bullied." The paternity test report instantly forgotten, Sarah's maternal instincts kicked in. She raced to the school, her heart pounding. Daniel's boss, true to his word, had followed through on his threat to complain about Sophia. He was at the school, and Brenda was there too, her face contorted with rage. A kindergarten teacher who can't even teach properly, spreading rumors about parents. Someone like you, fit to be a teacher? You're nothing but a homewrecker, a gossipmonger, running your mouth everywhere. You deserve to have that mouth of yours ripped right off. Brenda lunged at Sophia, her nails extended like claws. Sophia, petite and defenseless, was no match for Brenda's fury. She was pushed to the ground, Brenda's attack relentless. Sophia's face was already swelling, her clothes ripped and torn. "Let her go!" Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with fury. Snatching a mop leaning against the wall, she swung it with all her might, bringing it down hard across Brenda's back. Brenda was hospitalized, thanks to my mop attack, and Sophia wasn't in much better shape, needing medical attention herself. Once I explained the whole Ethan is Daniel's son bombshell, Sophia was righteously indignant on my behalf. "When you married Daniel, you were so understanding, no car, no house, not even a proper bride price. And before the wedding, when his mother was sick and needed hundreds of thousands for medical bills, you paid for it all, didn't you? You've been so good to him, and he repays you with cheating? Unforgivable. Divorce him." I had a fiery temper, while Daniel was always so mild-mannered, patiently soothing me. I wasn't close to my family, my parents were long gone. I'd always considered Daniel and Lily my closest kin. His betrayal felt like a deep, sickening wound. But I had zero tolerance for betrayal. Now that I knew he'd cheated, divorce was inevitable. Sophia needed to get her injuries treated. I told her to rest while I went to fetch her medication. At the pharmacy counter, a pregnant woman kept glancing at me. Finally, she approached me, a friendly smile on her face. "Excuse me, are you Sarah?" "Yes, that's right." I looked at her, puzzled. "Do I know you?" The pregnant woman chuckled. "We were in the same delivery room when you had your twins." "Twins?" I frowned. "I think you must be mistaken. I only had one daughter, Lily." But the woman was adamant. "No mistake. You're very beautiful, and twins, especially boy-girl twins, are quite rare." I remember. "You so clearly." "I had a son last time, and this time I'm hoping for a daughter." "Then I can be just like you, with one of each." A complete stranger wouldn't just make this up. But when I gave birth, both Daniel and Evelyn had insisted it was only one daughter. Evelyn, with her obsession with grandsons, had never let me forget that I only produced a girl, often making snide remarks about it over the years. Just to be sure, after parting ways with the pregnant woman, I went to the hospital records department to inquire. "Sarah?" "Yes, you did deliver twins back then, a boy and a girl." The hospital clerk's words hit me like a physical blow. I felt lightheaded, the world tilting around me. I had twins? Why would Daniel and Evelyn lie to me? And what happened to the other baby? And then, Ethan. Everything clicked into place. A cold dread settled in my stomach. Thankfully, I still had Ethan's hair sample. A mother-child DNA test. That was the next step. What started as a suspicion of infidelity had spiraled into something far more sinister. My instinct was to seek Sophia's counsel. She was always the level-headed one, the strategic thinker, while I tended to be impulsive. But as I headed back to where I'd left Sophia resting, I saw Daniel. He was there, arguing with Sophia, their voices raised in anger. They were too far away to make out the words, but it was clear they were both highly agitated. I even saw Daniel raise his hand as if to strike Sophia. The nerve of this man. Not only was he cheating, but now he was threatening my best friend? Rage surged through me. I was about to storm over and intervene when I heard Sophia's voice, sharp and piercing, cut through the air. Sarah will be back any minute, Daniel. Aren't you afraid she'll figure things out? Go on, hit me. Show me what you're made of. Figure things out? What things? A wave of unease washed over me. I saw Daniel visibly tense up at Sophia's words. He hesitated, then abruptly turned and walked away. I approached Sophia. What was that about? Why were you and Daniel fighting? He's blaming me, Sophia said, her voice tight with resentment. If I hadn't told you about the family photo mix-up, you might never have suspected his affair. He's taking it all out on me. Her explanation sounded plausible, but something felt off. I'd known Sophia for too long, I could sense when she wasn't being entirely truthful. I wanted to press her about what she meant by figure things out, but the question died on my lips. Looking at Sophia, at her familiar face, I suddenly felt a strange disconnect, as if I were seeing a stranger. Forcing myself to remain calm, I took Sophia home, then went directly to the DNA testing center, Ethan's hair sample clutched in my hand, along with a sample of my own. As fate would have it, I ran into Daniel just as I was leaving the testing center. He didn't question me, didn't pry. But before the test results even came back, he showed up at my door, with Evelyn in tow. Evelyn dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, launching into a dramatic confession. Sarah, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault, she wailed. I never wanted you to go back to our hometown, because I was terrified you'd find out about my past, about how I seduced my sister's husband, how I drove my own sister to suicide. And then Brenda, Daniel's boss's mistress, she couldn't get pregnant. It just so happened that she was at the hospital the day you gave birth. She demanded I give her your baby boy to raise, or she'd expose my past to you. I was terrified you'd despise Daniel, leave him. In a moment of panic, I gave her your son. It was all me, Sarah, Daniel had nothing to do with it. Each word Evelyn uttered was like a fresh shock. I'd always thought of her as just a bit flamboyant, a little eccentric. I never imagined the depths of her past transgressions. Daniel, his eyes red-rimmed, spoke up, his voice low. I'm not blameless either. When I found out what Mom had done, I should have told you the truth right away. But I swear to you, Sarah, I've never cheated on you. And Ethan? Ethan is living a very comfortable life. He moved closer, his voice softening. He's over 4 years old now, starting to understand things. If you're not worried about the impact on him, on his upbringing, I can bring Ethan back home right now. They had both committed such monstrous acts, and now they were using my son's well-being to manipulate me, to guilt-trip me into forgiveness? A wave of revulsion washed over me, a mixture of shock, disgust, and disbelief at their sheer audacity. But I kept my voice even, deceptively calm. Daniel's boss seems to have no other son but Ethan. He's living a good life, and he might even inherit a fortune someday. I'm not blaming you. But you should have told me sooner. I wasn't sure why I was saying these words, what I was trying to achieve. Perhaps it was a test, a probe, to gauge their true motives. To my astonishment, my words seemed to hit the mark. Daniel visibly relaxed, a sigh of relief escaping his lips. He pulled me into an embrace. You're amazing, Sarah. You always think like I do. Next time, I promise, I'll tell you everything. Whether I was rich or poor, I'd never want my son to depend on someone else's inheritance. I was speechless, barely able to contain my fury at his utter lack of shame. That night, he tried to pull me close, attempting to smooth things over with intimacy, to play the make-up after a fight card. Not in the mood, I snapped, shoving him off the bed. The next morning, after Daniel left for work, Sophia called, her voice laced with outrage. Daniel cheated on you, and you're still staying with him? You're not divorcing him? I had lied to Daniel, pretending I'd forgiven him, but I hadn't told Sophia. How did she know? He didn't cheat, Sophia. Ethan is actually our son, Daniel's, and mine. I expected shock, mirroring my own. Instead, Sophia's voice sharpened with anger. Even if he didn't cheat, giving your son away without your consent is monstrous. Why aren't you divorcing him? Are you really that love-struck? Are you even fit to be a mother? Her reaction wasn't surprise, it was anger, focused on me. And she didn't seem at all surprised about Ethan being my son. A chilling realization dawned on me. Sophia, I said slowly, my voice laced with suspicion, are you even concerned about me at all? Or do you just want me to divorce Daniel as quickly as possible? I didn't mean it like that. Sophia stammered, a frantic edge creeping into her voice. She launched into a flurry of explanations, denials, justifications. But I wasn't listening anymore. All I wanted was to know the truth, to confirm or deny Evelyn and Daniel's confession. It wasn't difficult to contact Daniel's colleague. I spun a story about Daniel being stressed and overwhelmed, transferred some money to him, and asked him to invite Daniel out for drinks, to help him unwind. That evening, Daniel came home completely drunk, barely conscious. He collapsed on the living room floor, and while he lay there, I went through his phone. I read everything. And what Evelyn and Daniel had told me was mostly true. Except Ethan wasn't given away. He was sold to Brenda for $1 million. Daniel, insecure and emasculated by my success, had sold our son for money, and to use my supposed inability to bear a son against me. And he dreamed of his son inheriting his boss's fortune. But in addition to that horrifying discovery, I stumbled upon something even more sickening. Sophia had known about all of this from the very beginning. Sophia was the woman Daniel was cheating with. And now, she was pregnant, pressuring Daniel to divorce me. When he refused, Sophia had decided to use me as a pawn in her game. My best friend, seducing my husband. Not just coveting my husband, but also my wealth. How could anyone be so utterly, shamelessly depraved? A wave of dizziness washed over me. I copied all of their chat logs to my own phone. These vile people, conspiring to manipulate me, to destroy my life. I wouldn't let them get away with it. After securing the evidence, I called Sophia, feigning distress, sobbing for what felt like hours. Daniel and his mother, they've done something so terrible to me, Sophia. I can't bear it. You have to help me, Sophia. Sophia's voice was instantly eager, almost too eager. Of course, Sarah. How can I help? Come over to my place, I sobbed. Please, come now. Sophia, usually slow and hesitant, arrived with surprising speed, fueled by my supposed intention to finally divorce Daniel. She offered hollow words of comfort, patting my shoulder with false sympathy. I reached for a stack of flyers my assistant had dropped off that morning, shoving them into Sophia's hands. The flyers detailed Evelyn's sordid past, seducing her sister's husband, driving her own sister to suicide, and her present depravity, selling her own grandson for money, all for $1 million. And prominently featured on each flyer was a photo of Evelyn perched on Daniel's lap, giggling like a teenager. Sophia, I said, my voice trembling, I own a cleaning company. Everyone in this neighborhood knows my company, some are even my employees. If I put these up, it'll look terrible. But you're my friend. You'll help me distribute these around the community, won't you? Sophia stammered, making a string of flimsy excuses. I'm a kindergarten teacher, Sarah. Because of you, Brenda filed a complaint against me. My job is already hanging by a thread. And there are parents of my students living here. If they see me. We'd been friends for years. Whenever anyone wronged Sophia, I was the first one to jump to her defense, to fight her battles. I had been so blinded by loyalty, so quick to rush to her aid, that I'd never truly noticed the pattern. She always seemed to be in trouble, always needing my help, always the instigator, while I was the one who ended up making enemies. And now, when I needed her, she was making excuses, backing away. No wonder we were friends. It was always her grievances, her complaints, and I was the one who always ended up in conflict. I sighed dramatically, letting my shoulders slump. Oh, well. I was hoping to ruin Daniel and his mother, to vent my anger, and then divorce Daniel. What a pity. From the chat logs, it was clear Daniel was just toying with Sophia, he had no intention of leaving me. For Sophia to truly win, for her to take my place, I had to be the one to initiate the divorce. That was why she had gone to such lengths to make me believe Daniel was cheating, to incite conflict between us. And why she had subtly steered me towards discovering the truth about my son being sold. I might not be one for games and manipulation, but that wasn't because I was stupid. It was because I had trusted them, considered them family, too decent to suspect such treachery. But I had built a company from the ground up. I was far from brainless. Hearing me mention divorce, Sophia's reluctance vanished instantly. I'm your friend, Sarah. Of course, I'll help you, she declared, snatching the flyers with renewed enthusiasm. She hurried off to plaster the neighborhood with Evelyn's dirty secrets. It wasn't long before the online community groups were buzzing. Drove her own sister to suicide? Why doesn't she just die? Look at the way she dresses all the time, you just know she's not respectable. Sold her own grandchild. What kind of people are Daniel and his mother? Evelyn arrived at my doorstep in a fury, followed shortly by Daniel, who'd taken time off work. Mother and son confronted me, demanding answers, accusations flying. I retorted, my voice dripping with sarcasm, don't even bother blaming me. Go check the security cameras if you think it was me. If you can't stand living with me anymore, just divorce me. They were too greedy, too fixated on my company, to let me go. Divorce was the last thing they wanted. My words were just bait. Daniel, playing along, said tentatively, you didn't put up those flyers? I rolled my eyes. Go ask the security guards, check the CCTV footage. Go see for yourself if it was me. Daniel, familiar with the security personnel, made a quick phone call. He learned who had been distributing the flyers. His face darkened with fury. Who was it? Evelyn demanded, her voice shrill. Daniel spat out the name, Sophia. That little vixen. I only said a few words to her, and she dares to retaliate. And you, Daniel, Evelyn continued, turning on her son, you and that little hussy. Evelyn trailed off, cut short by Daniel's sharp gesture. But I knew. Evelyn had known all along about Daniel and Sophia's affair. She hadn't been pleased with Sophia as a potential daughter-in-law, which explained her snide comments when I'd invited Sophia for breakfast that morning. Evelyn and Daniel, each with their own excuses, quickly departed. As soon as they were gone, I quietly followed. They were heading straight for Sophia's apartment, fueled by rage and a thirst for revenge. The door was closed, obscuring the scene inside, but I could clearly hear the shouting, the sounds of things being smashed and thrown. Only after they left did I approach Sophia's place. Sophia, what happened? I looked at her bruised and swollen face, her disheveled hair. I had to suppress a wicked smile. It took every ounce of willpower I possessed, dredging up the most miserable memories of my life, to keep a straight face. Sophia, her voice trembling with righteous indignation, recounted, I helped you put up those flyers. And Daniel and his mother found out. They came here and attacked me. In the past, if Sophia had suffered even a minor slight because of me, I would have been consumed by guilt, instantly offering compensation, showering her with gifts worth tens of thousands every year, not to mention countless other favors. But this time I feigned ignorance, mirroring her usual behavior, offering a stream of sympathetic words, empty platitudes, but doing absolutely nothing of substance. Sophia, clearly infuriated by my lack of genuine concern, snapped, "Sarah, you." Before she could finish, a stain of blood blossomed between her legs. She clutched her abdomen, crying out in pain, begging me to take her to the hospital. I drove, deliberately taking the long route, dawdling along the way. Sophia, already frail and weakened, grew increasingly distressed. The hour-long delay pushed her to the brink of collapse. And then, by sheer coincidence, we passed Evelyn on the street. She was frantically trying to evade a disheveled, elderly man. In her haste to escape him, she stumbled on the pedestrian overpass stairs, losing her footing and tumbling all the way down to the street below. I recognized the man instantly. It was my mother-in-law's former lover, the very same man she'd so ruthlessly seduced, her sister's husband. I had even arranged for him to come to the city, a subtle nudge in my plan for revenge. He hadn't turned out to be the wealthy prize Evelyn had envisioned. Once she'd achieved her ambition, she'd quickly grown tired of him. Then, after Daniel had landed me, Evelyn had dumped him without a second thought, fleeing to the city to enjoy a life of supposed luxury. And now, karma had come full circle. Evelyn lay sprawled on the pavement at the foot of the overpass, a pool of blood spreading beneath her, her fate hanging precariously in the balance. In the back seat, Sophia's bleeding was worsening. I didn't want her dying in my car, bad luck and all. I pressed down harder on the accelerator. At the hospital, the doctor delivered grim news. Sophia had miscarried. And, due to complications, she would need a D&C. The bill, of course, ended up in my hands. But I wasn't about to be played for a fool again. As soon as she was wheeled into the operating room, I picked up Sophia's phone and sent a message to Daniel's boss. Sophia didn't have his contact details, but I did. A picture message would work just as well. "Ethan is your driver's son. Paternity test attached. Feel free to get a second opinion. I can't stand to see my best friend, Sarah, and you, being played by Daniel." I attached a photo of the paternity test report, and screenshots of the chat logs where Daniel fantasized about his son inheriting Mr. Feng's fortune. I didn't know Mr. Feng personally, but I'd heard stories from business acquaintances, and from Daniel himself. He was arrogant, boastful, intensely patriarchal, and prone to violent outbursts. His wife had given him 5 daughters and had endured years of abuse, eventually being committed to a mental institution. When Brenda had given him a son, he had boasted about it incessantly. Now that he knew the truth, that Ethan wasn't his, he would unleash his fury on Brenda and Daniel. Brenda and Daniel would undoubtedly blame Sophia for this exposure. Consider it payment for her services, a hired scapegoat. As for my son, Ethan, I wanted to shield him from the fallout. Before setting my plan in motion, I'd already arranged for Lily to invite Ethan over for playdates, and hired a nanny to care for them both. After what felt like an eternity, the operating room doors finally opened. Sophia emerged, pale and weak. The doctor spoke to her gently. "Your health isn't the best to begin with. This miscarriage, it might mean you won't be able to conceive again. But take care of yourself, and who knows, maybe one day." Never be able to conceive again? Karma. No. This can't be happening. Fate can't be this cruel. Sophia wailed, teetering on the edge of hysteria. I stepped closer to her bedside. Why not? Maybe it's just karma catching up with a mistress. Sophia's face drained of color, her eyes wide with horror. You knew? I sighed dramatically. You need to be more discerning in your choice of men next time. Daniel told me he was just playing with you, that he's always loved me. We have twins, you know. Divorce would be bad for the children. So, we're going to stay together, just like before. Daniel loses nothing. Pity about you, though. Daniel and his mother, going to such lengths to harm you, just to get rid of your baby, to win my forgiveness. And you wanted children so badly, and now you can never have any. How truly tragic. Sophia's eyes filled with tears, turning bloodshot with rage. Daniel. I hope he rots in hell. Under the weight of the devastating news, Sophia's eyes rolled back, and she fainted. Her resilience was pathetic. I hadn't even mentioned that I'd just set her up as the target of Brenda and Daniel's vengeful wrath, and she'd already collapsed. I left Sophia to her fate and went to check on Evelyn. She'd survived the fall, miraculously. Severe blood loss, multiple fractures, a long and painful recovery ahead, but alive. Once her old bones were healed, when she thought she'd escaped death and had been given a second chance at life, then it would be time for her to face prison. After checking on Evelyn, I instructed my assistant to monitor Brenda's situation, and then went home to play with my 2 children. Thankfully, Brenda wasn't a doting mother, and Mr. Fong only made occasional appearances. Ethan hadn't been completely corrupted by their toxic environment, and wasn't particularly attached to them. A small mercy amidst the chaos. As I played house with Lily and Ethan, my assistant called. Boss, Mr. Fong is beating up your husband and Brenda. Your husband's been half killed, he ran away. The woman is lying there, not moving. If he keeps going, he'll kill her. I've called the police. Okay, thank you. Daniel, despite his size, was a coward. He wouldn't dare fight back against his boss. I'd expected this. He ended up in the hospital, with a broken leg. I visited him, accompanied by my lawyer. Divorce, with nothing for you, or a lawsuit for selling our child, and prison. Your choice, I stated, my voice cold and unwavering. Daniel, ever the smooth talker, tried to sweet-talk me, to beg for forgiveness. But seeing my resolve, his smile finally faltered, replaced by a look of sullen resentment. Me going to prison, that'll affect both our children, you know. Don't you care about them? Of course, I cared. But I couldn't show it, couldn't give him any leverage. Money is the least of my worries. They don't need to chase after civil service jobs or iron rice bowls. I have enough money to last them several lifetimes. My words were confident, dismissive. Combined with my impatient, almost threatening demeanor, Daniel finally panicked. He grabbed the pre-prepared divorce papers, scribbling his signature without another word. As I turned to leave, I added, almost as an afterthought, I really should thank Sophia, you know. If it wasn't for her telling me about all the vile things you and your mother have done, I might never have found out. I saw the raw hatred flare in Daniel's eyes, and only then did I turn away. I took a photo of Daniel in his hospital bed, noting his room number, and posted it on social media, wishing my ex-husband a speedy recovery. With a broken leg, now was the perfect time for him to be vulnerable. Sophia wouldn't miss this opportunity. Sophia, my dear friend, consider this my final favor to you. I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. A few days later, news reached me that Sophia had stormed into Daniel's hospital room and castrated him, screaming that he'd robbed her of her motherhood, and now she was ensuring he'd never be a real man again. I heard about it secondhand. Apparently, the room was awash in blood. Sophia was arrested on the spot. I'd anticipated that I would sow discord between them, that their lives would become a tangled mess of mutual recrimination. But Sophia's brutal act of violence, the sheer savagery of it, was an unexpected bonus. 6 months later, Evelyn was discharged from the hospital. I reported her for child trafficking, presented the evidence, and she was taken straight from the hospital to prison. Daniel, crippled and disgraced, became a local pariah. Everywhere he went, he was met with whispers, with pitying, disgusted glances. He couldn't endure it. Immediately after the divorce was finalized, he slunk away from the city, disappearing without a trace. Sophia was facing years in prison, reportedly descending into madness behind bars. And Brenda, her face scarred and ruined by her enraged sugar daddy, remained in the hospital, a broken shell of her former self. Outside the kindergarten gates, the trees were lush and green, the air fragrant with flowers. I knelt down, patiently reminding my 2 children about school rules and safety. "We know, Mommy. We know. I'll take good care of Ethan, Mom. We're going to class now," Lily declared, taking Ethan's hand with a confident air, leading him into the kindergarten grounds. I watched them go, a genuine smile gracing my lips. Free from those toxic people, our lives were finally, gloriously, on the right path.